Hello, my name is Liam Carter. I'm 29 years old, living in Portland, Oregon, a city filled with fog and tree-lined streets. I work as a graphic designer, a job that allows me to escape into a world of colors and lines, where I can control everything, unlike real life. I'm not the type of person who opens up easily. My friends say I'm quiet, perhaps reserved. But if you've ever been abandoned by your family like I was, you'd understand why I've built invisible walls around myself. This story isn't easy to tell, but today I want to open up, just this once, to confront the memory that has haunted me for the past 15 years. It all started with an email. One Saturday morning, as I was sitting in my small apartment with my cat Rusty curled up on the sofa, I opened my laptop and saw a blinking subject line in my inbox. Subject: Mom and Dad's 25th wedding anniversary celebration. Sender: Mia Carter, my younger sister. I frowned, my heart beating a little faster. Mia, my sister who's 4 years younger than me, someone I haven't spoken to directly since I left home at 18. I clicked on the email, even though a part of me wanted to delete it immediately. Dear Liam, I know it's been a long time since we've talked. I hope you're doing okay. Mom and Dad are holding a 30th wedding anniversary celebration back home in Montana next month. They want the whole family to reunite. You're a part of this family. I hope you'll come. I read it over and over, each word like a small knife stabbing into my chest. You're a part of this family. Really, Mia? I gave a bitter laugh, but the smile quickly faded. Old memories flooded back like a cold wave, pulling me back to that summer day when I was 14, when I was left behind at a rest stop in Yellowstone. That memory, like a scar, has never truly healed. I grew up in a lower middle-class family in a small town in Montana. Our house was an old wooden cabin with a backyard full of weeds and a rickety fence. My father, Robert, was a car mechanic with a perpetually sour expression and a voice as sharp as a blade. My mother, Ellen, was a bank employee, always tired and quiet, as if she'd given up on feeling anything. Then there was Mia, my little sister, the light of my parents' eyes. She was pretty, smart, and always knew how to make them laugh. I, on the other hand, was the opposite, the clumsy, quiet eldest child who always seemed to do something wrong. I don't remember exactly what I did to become the troublemaker in my parents' eyes. Maybe it was because I broke one of Mom's favorite vases when I was 7, or because I got a bad grade in 5th grade. But I clearly remember the way Dad looked at me, as if I were a mistake that needed fixing. "Why can't you be more like Mia?" he'd often say, his voice dripping with disappointment. Mom would just stay silent, her eyes avoiding mine. And Mia, she'd just look at me with her big, round eyes, saying nothing, as if afraid to anger our parents. When I was 14, my family went camping in Yellowstone National Park. It was a rare trip, declared by Mom as a chance to bond as a family. I was excited, thinking I'd finally have a chance to make my parents see me differently. I carefully packed my things, checking every item on the list Mom gave me. But everything fell apart on the second day of the trip. That day, I was trying to set up a tent, an old, worn-out tent that Dad had used since he was young. While struggling with it, I accidentally tore a small corner of the tent. It wasn't a big tear, just a small one, but it was enough to send Dad into a rage. "What the hell are you doing, Liam?" he roared, his face red with anger. I tried to explain, but my voice was drowned out by his shouting. "You don't know how to take care of things, do you? If you're that useless, then fend for yourself." Mom stood there, arms crossed, saying nothing. Mia, who was 10 at the time, clutched her doll and looked at me with frightened eyes. I wanted to scream, to apologize, to do anything to fix it. But Dad had made up his mind. "Get in the car, Ellen, Mia, we're leaving." He turned to me, his voice cold as stone. "As for you, find your own way back." I stood there, frozen, watching the family's truck drive away from the rest stop, dust billowing behind the tires. I can still remember that feeling, like my heart was being crushed. All I had was a tattered backpack, a bottle of water, and not a single penny in my pocket. I walked along the trail to the nearest rest stop, about a mile from where we'd been camping. The rest stop was a small area by the road with a convenience store, a few gas pumps, and a parking lot full of trucks. The sun was setting and I, a 14-year-old kid, was left stranded in the middle of nowhere. I wandered around the rest stop trying not to cry. I didn't want anyone to see me as weak. I found a secluded corner behind the convenience store where there was an old wooden bench and a few trash cans. I sat there, clutching my backpack, listening to the sound of trucks whizzing by on the highway. Every time headlights swept past, I hoped it was Dad coming back to get me. But no one came back. That night was bitterly cold. I curled up on the bench, trying to keep warm with my thin jacket. The chirping of insects, the roar of passing trucks, and the pounding of my heart in my chest filled the air. I thought about calling someone, but I didn't have a phone. I thought about walking home, but home was dozens of miles away. All I could do was sit there, waiting, hoping, and fearing. I wondered if I was truly part of the family or just a burden they were ready to cast aside. I closed my eyes, trying to hold back the tears threatening to spill. "Don't cry, Liam," I told myself. "If you cry, they win." But the truth was, I was scared that they wouldn't come back, scared that I'd be stuck forever at this roadside rest stop, surrounded by strangers and the endless sound of trucks. I clutched my backpack tightly as if it were the only thing keeping me from falling into an abyss. As the first light of dawn broke, painting the sky a pale orange, I heard footsteps. They were heavy, slow, like those of someone in no hurry. I looked up, my eyes bleary from lack of sleep and the bone-chilling cold. An older man wearing a worn flannel jacket and a faded baseball cap stood looking at me. His face was weathered, with wrinkles like small roads on a map, but his eyes were kind, as if they had seen too much yet still held a trace of warmth. "You're Liam, aren't you?" he asked, his voice low and slightly hoarse, like the sound of old wood rubbing together. I nodded, too exhausted to be surprised. It was my grandfather, Walter, someone I'd only met a handful of times in my life, during brief visits when my father couldn't avoid taking me to his farm. My father and grandfather didn't get along. Dad called him a stubborn old man, while Grandpa said Dad only knew how to growl, not how to love. Their conflicts meant I rarely saw Grandpa, but each time we met I felt he saw me differently than my parents did. He looked at me as if I actually existed. "Why are you out here alone?" he asked, sitting down on the wooden bench beside me. He didn't press for an answer right away, just quietly pulled a cigarette from his jacket pocket, then tucked it back as if remembering I was there. I didn't want to tell him. Admitting the truth, that my parents had left me behind because I tore the tent, sounded so pathetic. I was afraid that if I opened my mouth I'd break down crying, and I didn't want him to see me weak. But he didn't push. He just patted my shoulder, a light but firm gesture like a silent promise. "Come on, kid," he said, standing up. "I was going to grab some coffee, but it looks like you need breakfast more." He led me into the rest stop's convenience store, where the smell of burnt coffee and toasted bread mingled with the faint scent of motor oil. He bought me an egg sandwich and a cup of hot chocolate, something I hadn't had since I was little. I devoured the food, the warmth from it spreading through me, as if it were chasing away some of the cold and fear in my heart. We sat there in a quiet corner of the store at a sticky plastic table. He sipped his black coffee, no sugar, and watched me. "You don't have to tell me if you're not ready," he said calmly. "But I know a 14-year-old kid doesn't just end up shivering out there all night for no reason." I looked down at my hands, dirty from clutching my backpack all night. I wanted to say something, but my throat felt tight. Instead, I just nodded, and he seemed to understand. After breakfast, he took me to his old pickup truck, a blue Ford with cracked leather seats and a faint smell of tobacco. "Let's go to my place," he said, not asking but stating. I didn't object. I didn't know where else to go, and the thought of leaving that rest stop brought me more relief than I expected. Grandpa's farm was about an hour's drive away, nestled among sprawling fields and low hills in Montana. His wooden house was small but cozy, with a porch covered in vines and an old barn in the backyard. Inside, everything was simple but clean. A worn armchair, a small fireplace, and family photos hanging crookedly on the walls. I noticed one picture of me at 5 years old, sitting on Grandpa's shoulders, grinning widely. I didn't remember that moment, but seeing the photo sent a sharp pang through my chest. He gave me a bowl of hot bean soup which he'd made himself and showed me to a small room with a single bed covered in a wool blanket. "Rest," he said. "You're safe now." I lay down, still clutching my backpack, and fell asleep within minutes. It was the deepest sleep I'd ever had, free of dreams or worries, just the feeling of being protected, even if only temporarily. The next few days at Grandpa's farm passed like a peaceful dream. He didn't force me to talk about what happened, but he was always there, quietly watching. He taught me how to care for the horses, how to fix a fence, and told stories about his time in the military. "Life isn't easy, Liam," he said one afternoon as we sat on the porch watching the sunset. "But you're stronger than you think. Don't let anyone make you believe otherwise." One evening, as we sat by the fireplace, he pulled an old pocket watch from his jacket, its glass face slightly scratched, but the second hand still ticking steadily. "This belonged to my grandfather," he said, placing it in my hand. "It's been through wars, through bad days, and it still runs. It'll remind you that time heals, but only if you choose to move forward." I gripped the watch tightly, feeling its weight, as if it held a story I wasn't yet ready to fully understand. I stayed at the farm for 3 days, but on the 4th, Grandpa said we had to face reality. "I'll take you back," he said firmly, "but I'm not letting this slide easily." I didn't want to go back. I wanted to stay with him where I felt I truly belonged. But I knew he was right. I couldn't hide forever. The drive back home was a long and heavy journey. I sat in the passenger seat, clutching my tattered backpack, my fingers absent-mindedly tracing the pocket watch in my jacket. The steady ticking of its second hand was the only thing keeping me calm. Grandpa didn't say much, only glancing at me occasionally as if to make sure I was still okay. But I wasn't okay. I dreaded returning to that house, where I had never truly been welcome. When Grandpa's truck pulled up in front of the house, I saw Dad standing there, arms crossed, his eyes cold and sharp. Mom was at the kitchen window looking out but not stepping outside. Mia, the 10-year-old with her blonde hair tied in a ponytail, peeked from behind the front door, her big eyes full of worry. Grandpa got out of the truck, shoulders squared, his stride unwavering. I heard him and Dad arguing, Grandpa's voice booming like thunder. "If you ever abandon that boy again, I'll report you to Child Protective Services. Do you hear me, Robert?" Dad gave a dry, mocking laugh. "You think you can scare me, old man?" But I saw Grandpa's eyes, unflinching, like those of someone who had lived through war and feared no one. He turned to me, placing a hand on my shoulder, heavy but warm. "You don't need to belong to them to be worthy of love," he said, his voice low but firm. "If you need me, you know where to find me." Then he got back in the truck, the engine roared to life, and he drove away, leaving me standing in the yard, feeling like I'd just lost the only person who truly understood me. Walking into the house, I felt the weight of a heavy silence enveloping everything. Dad didn't say a word, just glared at me before disappearing into the garage. Mom continued washing dishes, the clinking of plates the only sound in the kitchen. Mia looked at me, her lips parting as if she wanted to say something, but then she turned and ran upstairs. No one mentioned Yellowstone. No one apologized. It was as if leaving me at the rest stop was just a bad dream they wanted to forget. But for me, it was real, sharp and painful, like a cut. From that day on, I learned to live invisibly in my own home. I went to school, did my homework, ate dinner in silence, and avoided my parents' eyes. Dad continued to call me a troublemaker whenever I did something he didn't like, even if it was just spilling a glass of water. Mom was like a shadow, always busy with work or tending to Mia, as if I didn't exist. Mia, though still young, grew distant, I saw her trying to please our parents, always smiling, always obedient, as if afraid that if she wasn't perfect, she'd be treated like me. I didn't blame her. She was just a kid, and I knew she was scared too. In the years that followed, I lived like a tenant in my own family. I kept everything to myself, from the small joys like drawing in my room to the bigger sorrows I didn't dare share. Grandpa's pocket watch became my constant companion. Every night I lay in bed listening to its ticking, imagining that time would carry me away from this place. I wrote letters to Grandpa, long letters about school, my drawings, and the loneliness I felt. He replied with scrawled notes on yellowed paper, always ending with, "You're stronger than you think." When I turned 18, I left home. I received a scholarship to a college in Portland, Oregon, and didn't hesitate for a second. I packed my clothes, books, and the pocket watch into an old suitcase and boarded a bus without looking back. My parents didn't see me off. Mia, then 14, stood at the door giving a weak wave. I wanted to say something to her, but I just nodded and turned away. I didn't want to carry any memories from that house, but they followed me anyway, like shadows I couldn't shake. Portland was a fresh start, but it wasn't easy. I worked part-time at a coffee shop, drew at night, and learned how to live alone. I rented a small apartment with windows overlooking wet streets and lush green trees. I adopted a cat, naming him Rusty for his orange fur, and he became my only companion. I made a few friends at school, kind people who didn't really understand me. I didn't blame them. I had built walls too high, and I didn't know how to bring them down. Graphic design came as a lifeline. I found joy in creating worlds on a screen where I could control every detail. I worked hard, built a stable career, and gradually became a version of Liam I didn't hate. But deep down, I was still that 14-year-old boy left at the rest stop, clutching a backpack and waiting for a miracle. My small apartment in Portland was a safe haven, its walls covered with sketches and bathed in the soft glow of a desk lamp. Rusty, my orange tabby cat, often curled up on the sofa, yawning as I worked late into the night. My life, though simple, had found its own rhythm. Morning coffee, design projects, and quiet evenings with the steady ticking of the pocket watch Grandpa left me. I thought I had found peace, but then, as I mentioned, Mia's email shattered it all. It was a Saturday morning with light rain pattering against the window, cloaking Portland in a thick fog. I was sitting at my laptop sipping coffee when the email notification popped up. Subject: Mom and Dad's 30th wedding anniversary celebration. Sender: Mia Carter. My heart beat faster, as if someone had yanked it hard. I stared at the subject line, my finger hesitating over the mouse. Part of me wanted to delete the email immediately, just as I had tried to erase all memories of my family from my life. But another part, small and curious, urged me to open it. I read and reread Mia's email, letting out a dry, almost manic laugh. The sound echoed in the quiet apartment, startling Rusty, who lifted his head. Part of the family? How absurd. After all those years of being treated as an outsider, abandoned at a rest stop, forgotten in my own home. And now they wanted to pull me back? I felt anger, but mixed with it was something else. Curiosity, almost painful. What did they really want? A perfect family portrait to show off to the neighbors? Or had they actually changed? I stood up, pacing the small living room. Rusty jumped down and rubbed against my legs as if trying to comfort me. I picked up the pocket watch, its second hand still ticking steadily, a reminder of Grandpa's words. Time heals, but only if you choose to move forward. But what did moving forward mean? Forgetting? Forgiving? Or facing it head on? I opened my desk drawer and pulled out the old photo Grandpa took of me at the rest stop. In it, I'm sitting on the wooden bench, hair disheveled, eyes red, but my lips curved in a forced smile. I don't know why he took that picture, but now it was proof of a pain I couldn't deny. I placed the photo next to my laptop, looking at my 14-year-old self, and asked, Liam, how far have you come? That entire day, I couldn't get anything done. My design projects sat untouched on the screen, their lines fading in my mind. I thought about Montana, the old wooden house, my parents, and Mia. I remembered the rare times Mia tried to talk to me after the Yellowstone incident, her eyes always full of guilt and fear, as if mentioning it would anger our parents. I didn't blame her. She was young, and in our family, pleasing our parents was the only way to survive. But now, Mia was 25, a promising young lawyer from what I'd overheard from a few acquaintances back home. What did she want by sending this email? I sat down, wrote a reply, then deleted it. Wrote another, then deleted that too. Mia, thanks, but I'm not sure I want to come. Too weak. Mia, I don't belong to that family anymore. Too bitter. In the end, I shut the laptop without sending anything. But Mia's email was like a pebble in my shoe, impossible to ignore. That night, I lay in bed listening to the rain tapping against the window. Rusty curled up beside me, his breathing steady. I held the pocket watch, feeling its weight in my hand. I thought of Grandpa, how he had saved me not just from the rest stop, but from the feeling that I wasn't worthy of love. I remembered his letters, his scrawled words. You're stronger than you think. I wondered what he'd say if I called him now. Maybe he'd tell me to go, not for my parents or Mia, but for myself, so I could stand tall and face my past. The next morning, I called Jack, a close friend from college, the only person I'd ever told about Yellowstone. Jack, an artist, was always blunt and never let me sink too deep into dark thoughts. "What are you thinking, Liam?" he asked when I told him about Mia's email. "What do you want to prove by going?" "I don't know," I admitted, my voice hoarse. "I just want to know if they've really changed. Or maybe I want them to see I'm not that useless kid anymore." Jack was silent for a moment, then said, "Then go, but not for them. Go because you deserve to face your past and walk away from it." His words echoed Grandpa's, and I knew I couldn't run anymore. I decided to go to Montana, not to reconcile, not to forgive, but to look my parents in the eye and ask why. Why they abandoned me. Why they never apologized. Why I was never enough for them. I wanted to stand before them, not as the scared 14-year-old boy, but as Liam Carter, 29, who had built a life from the ruins. I started preparing. I booked a bus ticket to Montana. I didn't want to drive. I wanted time to think on the way. I checked the pocket watch, making sure it was still running. I folded the old photo and tucked it into my wallet like a talisman. I didn't tell Mia or anyone else. I wanted to show up unannounced, to see their real reactions. Part of me feared they wouldn't care, that I'd still just be a shadow in their eyes. But another part, the part Grandpa had instilled with strength, believed I could face any answer they gave. The night before I left, I sat in my apartment, looking out the window. The rain had stopped, leaving sparkling droplets on the glass. Rusty jumped onto my lap, nuzzling my hand. I stroked him, whispering, "I'll be okay, right?" But I wasn't sure if I was asking Rusty or myself. I took a piece of paper and wrote a short letter to Grandpa. "Grandpa, I'm going back to Montana. I don't know what I'll find, but I'm carrying your watch, and I'll try to move forward like you said." I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer next to his old ones. Then I stood up, packed my suitcase, and prepared for the trip that would change everything. The bus ride from Portland to Montana took over 10 hours, jostling along winding roads and endless fields. I sat by the window watching the scenery pass by, green hills, golden wheat fields, and the vast Montana sky. The pocket watch rested in my hand, its steady ticking like a second heartbeat. I touched the old photo in my wallet, the 14-year-old boy huddled on a rest stop bench, and wondered if I was making a mistake by returning. But I had made my decision. I wasn't coming to reconcile. I was coming to confront. My parents' 30th wedding anniversary celebration was held at a grand estate on the outskirts of the town where I grew up. When the bus stopped at the station, I took a deep breath, grabbed my suitcase, and took a taxi to the venue. The estate appeared like a foreign painting, a large building with gleaming glass windows, a perfectly manicured lawn, and strings of golden lights hanging like tiny stars. Soft jazz music floated from a distance, mingling with the chatter and laughter of guests. I paused at the gate, feeling like an outsider stepping into a world that didn't belong to me. I wore a dark blue dress shirt and simple slacks, polite but not ostentatious. The pocket watch was in my pocket and the old photo was in my wallet. I hadn't told Mia or anyone I was coming. I wanted to see their genuine reactions, not rehearsed greetings. As I entered the main hall, I was overwhelmed by the opulence. Tables draped in white silk, sparkling wine glasses, and a live band playing Fly Me to the Moon. The guests, mostly my parents' friends and colleagues, were dressed in suits and evening gowns, laughing and talking animatedly. I felt out of place, like an unfinished sketch in the midst of a flawless oil painting. Dad was the first to spot me. He stood near the buffet table, holding a glass of wine, talking to a man in a gray suit. When his eyes met mine, he froze, the glass tilting slightly in his hand. "Liam," he said, his tone not exactly welcoming, more like an acknowledgement. Mom was a few steps away, adjusting a bouquet on a table. She looked up, her eyes flickering with surprise before settling back into their familiar impassivity. "You're here," she said, as if I were just another guest. No hug, no handshake, nothing. Mia was the next to notice me. She emerged from the crowd wearing a pale green dress, her blonde hair tied up high, looking like a grown-up version of the little girl who once clung to her doll as I was left behind. "Liam," she called, her voice trying to sound cheerful, but her eyes avoided mine. She gave me a quick, awkward hug. "I didn't think you'd come," she said, forcing a smile. I'm really glad." "Are you?" I asked, my voice soft but sharp. Mia blinked, not answering right away. I could see she wanted to say something, but she only gestured for me to join her at the buffet table, as if to avoid any deeper questions. The party unfolded like a perfectly staged play. My parents, Robert and Ellen, stood on a small stage, receiving applause as one of Dad's friends gave a speech about their exemplary marriage. I sat in a corner of the room, sipping water, observing. Everyone laughed, clinked glasses, and clapped, but all I saw was pretense. 30 years, and no one knew about the boy left at a rest stop. No one knew about the years I lived like a ghost in their home. As the guest speeches began, a hot surge rose in my chest. I hadn't planned to do anything. I had only come to observe, to understand. But when the MC asked if anyone wanted to share, I stood up, almost involuntarily. All eyes turned to me. Mia, sitting a few tables away, widened her eyes. Mom gripped Dad's hand, a flash of panic in her eyes. Dad just glared as if he already knew what I was about to do. I walked onto the stage, my heart pounding, but my steps steady. I had no prepared speech, only the pocket watch in my pocket and the photo in my wallet. I took a deep breath, looked out at the crowd, and began. "Hello, everyone. I'm Liam Carter, Robert and Ellen's eldest son." My voice came out clearer than I expected. Today is a special day, celebrating my parents' 30th anniversary. But I'm not here to talk about love or family happiness. I'm here to tell a different story. The room fell silent. I saw Dad tighten his grip on his wine glass, Mom lower her head. Mia covered her mouth, her eyes glistening with tears. I continued, my voice trembling but unwavering. When I was 14, our family went camping in Yellowstone. I accidentally tore a tent, and my father told me that if I couldn't take care of things, I had to find my own way back. They got in the car, my parents and my little sister, and left me at a roadside rest stop. Alone, with no money, no phone, in the cold night. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I pulled out the pocket watch and held it up. I spent the night on a wooden bench listening to trucks and wondering if I was really part of this family. Luckily, my grandfather Walter found me. He gave me this watch and told me that family isn't what you're born into. It's what you choose. I placed the watch on the main table right in front of my parents. This reminds me that I'm worthy of love, even if my family once thought otherwise. Dad shot to his feet, his face red. "Enough, Liam. It was just a misunderstanding. Are you trying to ruin this day?" His voice was sharp, but I saw unease in his eyes. Mom stayed silent, her eyes downcast, her shoulders trembling slightly as if holding something back. Mia burst into tears, stood up, and ran outside. I looked at Dad, unflinching. A misunderstanding? You call leaving your son alone on a highway a misunderstanding? I pulled out the old photo and held it up for everyone to see. This is me, 14 years old, right after I was left behind. If Grandpa hadn't come, I don't know what would have happened to me. The guests were stunned, some covering their mouths, others whispering. I turned back to my parents, my voice lowering but firm. I'm not here to ruin anything. I just want the truth. And the truth is, I've lived with that memory for 15 years and no one in this family has ever apologized. I stepped off the stage. The air in the room felt heavy, as if all the light had been drained. I walked outside to find Mia. She was in the backyard, her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Liam, she whispered, I'm sorry. I didn't dare say anything back then. I was just a kid. I placed a hand on her shoulder and said softly, I don't blame you, Mia. You were young and scared, I understand. She looked up, her eyes red, and for the first time in years I felt a thread of connection slowly rekindling. Under the soft glow of the golden lights in the estate's backyard, with the faint sound of jazz drifting from the main hall, we sat there, brother and sister, as if time had paused to allow a moment of healing. Mia wiped her tears, managing a weak smile. I always wanted to call you, she said, her voice trembling. But every time I picked up the phone, I was afraid you wouldn't want to hear from me. Afraid you'd think I was like them. I looked at her, the 25-year-old woman with her blonde hair tied high, but still saw the shadow of the 10-year-old girl who stood silently as I was left behind. You're not like them, I replied. You were just trying to survive like I was. We sat there, sharing stories we had kept buried for years. Mia talked about her life as a lawyer, the long days at the office, and the pressure to maintain a perfect image to please our parents. I told her about Portland, about Rusty, about the nights I drew until dawn, trying to find meaning in the lines on my screen. We didn't mention Yellowstone, but the memory hung between us like a scar that had healed but still left a trace. When we returned to the reception hall, the atmosphere had shifted. The guests were still laughing and talking, but I could feel discreet glances directed my way. My parents stood in a corner of the room speaking with a few friends, but they didn't look at me. I hadn't expected anything more. My speech had shattered the perfect picture they had tried to paint, and I knew they wouldn't easily forgive me. The next morning, as I prepared to board the bus back to Portland, my phone buzzed. A text from Dad. You humiliated us in front of everyone. Are you satisfied? I stared at the screen, feeling a surge of anger, but it wasn't as fiery as before. Instead, I felt relief. I had spoken the truth, not to hurt them, but to free myself. I replied, short and firm. I only said what happened. If you feel ashamed, that's not my fault. I sent the message, then turned off my phone, not waiting for a response. Mia saw me off at the bus station. She hugged me, this time tighter, more genuine. Will you come back? She asked, her voice full of hope. I smiled, the first real smile I'd had in Montana in years. If you come to Portland, Rusty would love to meet you. She laughed, and we parted with a promise to stay in touch. This time, I believed she would. On the bus ride back to Portland, I thought about what had happened. I hadn't found forgiveness from my parents, and maybe I didn't need it. But I had found Mia, and that was worth more than I'd expected. The pocket watch in my hand kept ticking, a reminder that I had moved forward just as Grandpa had said. A few weeks later, I received an unexpected email from a stranger, a friend of Mia's named Clara, who worked for a local Montana newspaper. She had been at the party and heard my speech. I was moved by your story, she wrote. I'd like to write an article about it, about emotional abandonment in families and how you overcame it. Would you be okay with that? I hesitated. My story wasn't for flaunting, but I thought of Grandpa's letters, his words that I was stronger than I thought. Maybe my story could help someone, just as he had helped me. I agreed. Clara came to Portland, and we sat in a small coffee shop where I told her everything. From the rest stop in Yellowstone to the years of building my own life, from the pocket watch to the speech at the party. She listened, took notes, and asked questions that forced me to look deep within myself. When the article was published, titled "Left Behind and Found," I read it with a strange feeling, like seeing my life through someone else's eyes. The article told my journey, but it wasn't just the story of a boy abandoned. It was about resilience, about finding family in the people you choose, and about the power of truth. The article spread faster than I expected. It was shared on social media, and I started receiving emails from strangers. People who said they too had felt abandoned, not just physically, but emotionally. A young woman wrote that she found the courage to leave a toxic family after reading the article. An older man shared that my story reminded him of his own, and he had called his estranged son after years apart. Each email was a small pebble rippling across the surface of my life's lake. An organization supporting at-risk youth in Portland reached out, inviting me to speak at an event. I hesitated, unsure if I was the right person. But then I thought of the 14-year-old boy shivering at the rest stop, and I knew I had to do it. At my first talk, I stood before a group of teenagers, their eyes full of skepticism and hurt. I brought the pocket watch and the old photo, sharing my story. "Family isn't always the people you're born to," I said. "Sometimes family is the people you choose, the ones who remind you that you're worthy of love." As I spoke, I saw some kids nod, others wipe away tears. After the talk, a skinny boy with messy hair approached me. "I felt like no one wanted me too," he said, his voice barely a whisper. I handed him the pocket watch, letting him hear its ticking. "Time will help you," I said, echoing Grandpa's words. "But you have to choose to move forward." Those talks became a part of my life. I started working with the organization, sharing my story at schools, community centers, and even on podcasts. Each time I told it, I felt lighter, as if peeling away layers of painful memories. The pocket watch and the photo became symbols, not just of pain, but of survival, of choosing to move forward. Mia and I began talking more regularly. She visited me in Portland, bringing a bottle of wine and an old photo of us as kids standing in front of Grandpa's farm. "I want us to be a real family," she said, and I nodded, knowing that this time we had a chance to start over. We sat in my small apartment under the dim glow of the lamp, sharing stories of the old days, of the rare moments we felt happy together. Rusty curled up on the chair, watching us as if he understood this was a special moment. I felt a sense of relief, as if a part of me long imprisoned by painful memories was slowly being set free. But that peace didn't last. One Tuesday afternoon, as I was finalizing a design project, my phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number with a Montana area code. I frowned and answered. An older woman's voice came through, gentle but tinged with worry. "Liam, this is Helen, Walter's neighbor. I think you should know. Walter's not doing well. He didn't want me to tell you, didn't want you to worry, but I thought it wasn't right to keep it from you." My heart seemed to stop. "Not doing well, how?" I asked, my voice dry. Helen explained that Grandpa had been weakening over the past few months, coughing a lot, eating poorly, and recently had to spend a few days in the hospital. "He didn't want you to drop everything and come," she said. "But I thought you needed to know. He's all alone." I hung up, my hands trembling. The pocket watch sat on my desk, its ticking louder than ever. I thought of Grandpa, the man who saved me from the rest stop, who gave me the strength to move forward. He didn't want me to know because he was afraid I'd worry, but how could I stay in Portland when he needed me most? I immediately called my boss, requesting emergency leave. "I have to go to Montana," I said, offering no further explanation. I packed a few clothes, tucked the old photo and the pocket watch into my bag, and booked the earliest bus ticket. This trip to Montana was entirely different from the last. There was no inner conflict or curiosity about my family. Only a cold, gripping fear. fear that I wouldn't make it in time. When the bus stopped in town, I rushed straight to Grandpa's farm. The wooden house was just as I remembered, but the vine-covered porch looked weary, as if it were aging alongside him. Helen greeted me at the door, hugging me tightly. "You're here," she whispered. "He'll be so happy." Grandpa lay in his old bed in the bedroom, frailer than I remembered, his wrinkle-lined face pale, but his eyes still bright, like two embers that never went out. "Liam," he said, his voice weak but warm. "You didn't have to come, kid." I took his hand, feeling his thin fingers. "I want to be here," I replied. "With you." The next 2 weeks were the hardest but most meaningful of my life. I stayed at the farm taking care of Grandpa. I cooked bean soup using his recipe, though it was never as good as his. I sat by his side, reading the letters we'd exchanged, telling him about Portland, about the talks I gave, about how my story had helped other kids. He smiled, weak but proud. "You've done well, Liam," he said. "I always knew you were stronger than you thought." Mia visited a few times when her law job allowed. She brought flowers, sat by Grandpa, held his hand, and cried. "I'm sorry I didn't visit more often, Grandpa," she said. He just patted her head as he had when we were kids. "You're here now. That's enough," he replied. Those moments, though brief, were the first time I felt we were truly a family, not with our parents, but with Grandpa, who loved us unconditionally. My parents, unsurprisingly, never visited. I called, texted, told them Grandpa was fading. No response. Helen shared that the rift between Grandpa and Dad had started long ago, before I was even born. Dad called him a stubborn old man, while Grandpa never forgave Dad for how he treated me. Their silence didn't surprise me, but it still hurt. I wondered how someone could turn their back on their own father, the man who raised them, the way they had turned their back on me. One morning, as the sun rose over Montana's fields, Grandpa passed away. I sat by his bed, holding his hand, listening as his breathing grew faint. He didn't say much, just whispered, "Keep the watch, Liam, and keep yourself." Then he closed his eyes, his face peaceful as ever. I sat there, crying quietly, not out of grief, but because I knew he had lived a full life and given me everything he had. I called Dad, my voice calm but cold. "Grandpa's gone. The funeral's this weekend." He only said, "I'm busy. Can you handle it?" I hung up, not wanting to hear more. Mia, upon hearing the news, rushed to the farm immediately. She hugged me, sobbing, and we sat there in a house now filled only with memories. Grandpa's funeral was simple, just as he was. Mia, Helen, a few neighbors, and I held it at the town's small church. No lavish flowers, no long speeches, just a wooden coffin, a photo of Grandpa standing in front of his farm, and the pocket watch I placed beside him, a promise that I would keep moving forward. My parents didn't come. I wasn't surprised, but Mia was. "How could they do this?" she whispered, her voice thick with pain. I took her hand. "They've made their choices, Mia. We make ours." More townspeople came than I expected. They shared stories of Grandpa, the soldier who fought in wars, the resilient farmer, the neighbor always ready to help. I stood up, sharing my story about how he saved me from the rest stop, about the letters, about the watch. "Grandpa wasn't just my family," I said. "He was family to anyone who needed a place to belong." When I finished, Helen hugged me, whispering, "Walter would be proud of you." After the funeral, I stayed in Montana a few days to clean up the farm. I found an old wooden box in Grandpa's room filled with letters and photos. Among them was one I'd never seen. Me, maybe 3 or 4 years old, standing beside Grandpa in front of the horse barn, both of us beaming. I kept that photo along with the pocket watch I took back from the funeral. They were the final pieces of Grandpa, pieces I'd carry forever. Back in Portland, I felt a change within me. I still worked, drew, and gave talks, sharing my story. But now, I didn't just talk about the rest stop or resilience. I talked about Grandpa, the man who taught me that family isn't blood but love and choice. Mia and I kept in touch, and she began joining me at talks, sharing her own story of reconnecting with her brother and learning to forgive herself. Those talks didn't just help the listeners, they helped us heal bit by bit from old wounds. 6 months after Grandpa's funeral, I got a call from Mia. Her voice trembled over the phone, not with the usual excitement we shared when talking about new plans. "Liam," she said, pausing as if searching for words. "Dad has cancer, lung cancer. The doctors say it's early, but the treatment costs are high. Mom and Dad are struggling financially, but I'm not sure they can manage." I sank onto the sofa, Rusty jumping onto my lap as if sensing my tension. Cancer. I tried to picture Dad. The man always scowling, always calling me a troublemaker, now fighting something bigger than his temper. I didn't know what I felt. Anger, pity, or just a cold emptiness. "Are they okay?" I asked, my voice flat. Mia sighed. "Mom's so worried she can't sleep. Dad, he's still stubborn, refusing to admit he needs help. But I think they're struggling." She paused, then added softly, "I just thought you should know." I hung up, staring out the window. Portland rain fell again, droplets streaking down the glass. I thought of Dad, of the years he never apologized, of how he left me at the rest stop, of how he didn't attend Grandpa's funeral. Part of me wanted to turn my back as they had done to me. But then I touched the pocket watch on the table, its steady ticking like Grandpa's heartbeat. "Time heals," he'd said, "but only if you choose to move forward." What did moving forward mean? Forgetting or forgiving? A few days later, Mom called. Her voice was weary, no longer carrying its usual detachment. "Liam," she said, "I know you don't want to hear from me. But your father, he needs surgery. We don't have enough money. I didn't know who else to ask." A long silence stretched between us like an invisible wall. "Can you help?" she asked, her voice almost a whisper. I gripped the phone, anger flaring. Help? After everything they'd done? After they abandoned me? After they skipped Grandpa's funeral? I wanted to scream, to say they didn't deserve it. "Mom," I replied, my voice cold, "I don't owe this family anything." Then I hung up, my heart pounding. Rusty looked at me, his golden eyes seeming to ask what I'd done. That night I couldn't sleep. I held the pocket watch, opened the old photo of me at the rest stop. I thought of Grandpa, how he saved me, not just by taking me home, but by showing me I was worthy of love. He never taught me to hate. He taught me that forgiveness isn't about erasing the past, but choosing not to let it control you. I thought of Dad, not as the father who abandoned me, but as a man facing death, and I knew I couldn't turn my back. I called Mia the next morning. "Do you have Mom and Dad's bank account details?" I asked. "I'll send money, but I want you to handle it. Don't tell them it's from me." Mia was silent for a moment, then said, "Are you sure, Liam? After everything?" I smiled, though she couldn't see. "I'm not doing it for them, I'm doing it for me and for Grandpa." Mia agreed, and I transferred a sum from my savings, not everything, but enough to cover Dad's surgery and treatment. In the months that followed, Mia updated me on Dad's condition. The surgery was successful, and his condition showed positive signs, though he needed regular medication and a strict diet. Mom started calling Mia more often, asking about me, but I told Mia to just say I was busy. I wasn't ready to talk to them, not ready to face them again. Then one day Mia called, her voice hesitant. "Liam, Dad wants to see you. He knows you helped even though you didn't want him to know. He's changed, Liam. He wants to talk." I sat down, watching Rusty yawn on the chair. "See, Dad?" I pictured him sitting there, weakened from months of treatment, trying to say words he'd never said in my lifetime. But I didn't feel ready. "I'm not there yet, Mia," I said. "Maybe someday, but not now." A few weeks later, a letter arrived from Montana. I recognized Dad's handwriting, firm but now slightly shaky. I opened it, my heart racing. The words sprawled across the page, unlike the man who only knew how to growl and criticize. "Liam, I know I don't deserve to write this letter. I was wrong for a long time. That day in Yellowstone, I let my anger take over and hurt you. I didn't apologize, didn't make it right, and I let you grow up feeling unloved. Your mother shares the blame, but I'm the most at fault. When I found out you helped me through this illness, I didn't know how to thank you. You owed me nothing, yet you chose to help. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I want you to know I'm sorry. If you ever want to meet, I'll be here. Dad. I read the letter, then folded it, placing it beside the pocket watch. I didn't cry, but I felt a wave of emotion rise. Not anger, but a strange relief. Dad had admitted his mistakes, something I never thought he'd do. I wasn't ready to meet him, but the letter was enough to know I'd done the right thing by helping, not for him, but for myself. Life in Portland went on. I kept drawing, sharing my story, and now I added a lesson about forgiveness, not erasing the past, but choosing not to let it define you. I told the kids at my talks, you can't change what others do to you, but you can choose how you respond. Forgiveness isn't about making them feel better, it's about setting yourself free. Mia and I stayed in touch, and she became an important part of my life. We weren't a perfect family, but we were family, one built from broken pieces, from love and choice. Rusty still curled up beside me each night, and the pocket watch kept ticking, reminding me that time doesn't just heal. It gives you the chance to write the rest of your story. If I have advice for anyone carrying wounds from the past, it's this. Don't let pain define you. Find the people who see your worth like Grandpa did for me. Hold on to the things that remind you you're worthy of love, a watch, a photo, or just a kind word. And choose to move forward, not for others, but for yourself. Because in the end, family isn't where you're born. It's where you find yourself. Self. 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 Self.